The United States is a nation of laws, or at least it likes to think it is. We've got everything from speeding tickets for texting while driving to fines for failing to make your bed. But sometimes our laws get a little weird. Sometimes they get weird and wacky, and sometimes they just get plain stupid. But nope, it's still illegal to do the deed with your favorite family member in 24 states. Now, the reason why this law exists is so that children aren't born with genetic birth defects. We don't know what kind of defects we're talking about specifically, but it's safe to say that nobody wants their kid to grow up with cyclopia. You can't even give someone a high five if you meet them on the street. The law was put in place in the 1970s after a woman reported being groped by a stranger and the police were unable to find the culprit. Yes, this law exists, and yes, it's enforced. You heard that right, stilts. Now, there are several theories as to why this law exists. One is that it was passed after a man named Charles E. Parkhurst tried to rob a bank using stilts. Another is that it was passed to prevent people from stealing pigeons. But the most likely explanation is that it was passed in 1873 to prevent people from entering buildings on stilts, which basically means anyone who makes a living begging on the streets. Yeah, seriously. If you want to get a DUI, just head over to New York. Oh wait, no, don't. And this law isn't in place to protect your dog or you or anyone else. It is purely a traffic safety measure designed to ensure that drivers can avoid hitting dogs that are chasing after balls or frisbees. That's why every dog owner must carry a flashlight while walking their dog after dark, and every dog must wear a collar with a reflective tag. So if you're ever in Oregon and you forgot to grab the leash and the flashlight, you should probably stay indoors. The state recently passed a law that will revoke your driver's license if you're caught driving drunk twice in 5 years. So if you're ever in New York and you feel like going for a joyride, just make sure you don't drink too much beforehand. Regardless of why it was passed, it's still on the books today. So watch your step, because if you're ever walking down the street in Massachusetts and you see a panhandler on stilts, you might want to cross the street. Or better yet, just keep your eyes peeled for any stilts in general. If you're caught being loud while you're trying to dig into some KFC, you could be fined up to $500. This law was likely passed to protect barbers from competition, but it's still on the books today, meaning that if you want to give yourself a trim, you'll have to pay someone else to do it. In fact, New York City has special open container laws that allow people to drink openly in public places. And it's all because of a bizarre court ruling in 2008 that overturned the state's existing liquor laws. The judge in the case argued that the law violated her constitutional rights to equal protection under the law, and she was right. That's why it's still legal today. So if you're ever in New York City and you feel like having a drink, you should be able to do that without worrying about getting arrested. And the craziest part about this law is that it applies to everyone except licensed barbers. So if you're ever in Mississippi and you have a buddy who is willing to give you a haircut, you should probably hire him. Otherwise, you could end up in jail. Now, nobody knows exactly why this law exists. And this includes revolvers, rifles and shotguns, but not pistols. And that's because the law was passed in 1931 when pistols weren't really a thing. These days, they're the most common type of firearm, but Missouri lawmakers haven't gotten around to updating this law yet. So if you're ever drinking and toting a shotgun in Missouri, make sure you don't get drunk. It was probably just one of those things where a bunch of Atlanta's city fathers got together, looked around and said, "You know what? People eating fried chicken too loudly really bothers me. What are we gonna do about it?" And the answer was simply make it illegal. So the city decided to pass a law against unwanted touching. And it's still in effect today, although there is a defense known as Operation Good Touch, which allows you to touch someone if you're engaging in a bona fide act of kindness. So if you're ever in San Francisco and you want to rub a stranger's back or something, you should probably just run. So here are some of the weirdest laws still active in the US today. And you might be asking yourself, why would anyone do that in the first place? Well, it turns out that the law was actually enacted to prevent young lovers from whispering sweet nothings into each other's ears while riding the rails. Specifically, it was meant to prevent them from whispering about alcohol, tobacco, or firearms. And you're probably asking yourself, well, how did they know what the kids were whispering about? And the answer to that is simple. They didn't. They just passed a blanket law against whispering on trains. So if you're ever in Florida and you have something super important to tell your partner, make sure to shout it. Oh boy, it's gonna be a long 6 minutes. Let's go to Alaska now. This one doesn't really make sense, but maybe we can let it slide since it was enacted in 1943 during World War II. You see, back then the U.S. was concerned about enemy spies infiltrating the state and sabotaging its war efforts. Apparently people have been getting upset about the subject since at least 1995 when the Chicago Reader published a story about a man who ate his pizza too fast. The public outcry was so intense that the Illinois legislature had to introduce a bill outlawing premature pizza consumption. Now the bill didn't pass, but the law is still in place. So if you want to enjoy your food, make sure you pace yourself. And since military bases were often built near Native American reservations, the U.S. government decided to ban all natives from those bases. In San Francisco, it's illegal to shake hands while making a deal. Instead, you're supposed to use a traditional handshake or a hug or something. Perhaps the city fathers thought that handshakes were too boring, but this law has no real historical precedent, and there's no penalty for breaking it. So if you're ever in San Francisco and you need to seal a deal, just make sure to give a hearty slap. Just kidding. Don't do that because it's also legal to slap someone in San Francisco. The law remained in place until 2017 when it was finally repealed. But if you're thinking that this should have never been a law in the first place, you might want to head over to Arizona where you can't legally marry your first cousin. Now you might think that this is an outdated law that only exists in the Bible Belt. And speaking of not wanting things, it's also legal to eat your way through a Chicago deep dish pizza before the salad arrives. Next, we head over to California to take a look at some more of the Golden State's golden rules. But there is a method to this madness. It's actually part of a larger law that bans all forms of physical contact between strangers. That's right. And while we're on the subject of affection, let's move down to Florida, where it's illegal to whisper sweet nothings into your partner's ear on a train. That is unless you're in Georgia, because in Atlanta, it's illegal to shout while eating fried chicken. Next, we head up to Massachusetts, where it's illegal to enter a building on stilts. Next, we head down to Mississippi, where it's illegal to cut your hair without a barber's license. From there, we head over to Missouri, where it's illegal to be intoxicated in a public place while in charge of a firearm. But if you do get drunk, you might want to head over to New York City, where it's legal to get drunk. Speaking of drinking, it's also legal to drive under the influence in New York. Finally, we head over to Oregon, where it's illegal to walk your dog after dark without a flashlight. For more on dumb laws that still exist today, check out insane US laws that should be changed or watch this video instead.